Step inside a Victorian house from the outside. Everything looks calm, neat, perfect. But what if I told you that behind those closed doors, life is buzzing quietly, and the walls themselves are keeping secrets? Victorian England was obsessed with appearances. Streets were lined with cobblestones, carriages clattered by, and people moved with a sense of purpose that made every gesture feel like a performance. Men in top hats, women in long dresses that swished like waves with every step. Everything was about looking proper. In this world, respectability wasn't just important, it was everything. People judged each other on manners, on how well kept a house looked, and on the calm, orderly lives they projected. But as with most things that look perfect from the outside, the reality was often very different. Step inside a typical Victorian house. Big wooden doors, polished floors, and walls that seemed solid enough to keep the outside world at bay. Windows draped with heavy curtains, the garden trimmed neatly, almost like it was painted. From the outside, the house exudes calm order and control. But inside, life was moving in ways most visitors could never notice. Victorian households weren't just places to live, they were carefully arranged machines. And like any machine, there were parts that ran silently, out of sight, doing all the work that kept the whole system smooth. Those parts were the servants. The house was divided into two worlds under one roof. Upstairs, the family lived in comfortable, cozy rooms, soft carpets, polished furniture, and firelight that made everything glow warmly at night. They ate well, rested, read letters, and whispered in corridors. Their world was visible, admired, and meant to look perfect. Downstairs, the servants worked constantly, cooking, cleaning, polishing, carrying things, lighting fires, everything needed to maintain the illusion of calm upstairs. But they had one main rule: be invisible. A good servant was one you barely noticed, like a shadow or part of the furniture. And yet, these invisible workers saw everything. They heard arguments that were carefully muffled behind doors, noticed tension in quiet corners, saw secret glances, and observed small gestures that revealed moods the family tried to hide. But by all the rules of the house, they spoke of nothing. Silence was survival. Talking about what they saw could mean losing their job, which also meant losing their home and livelihood. A servant who didn't know when to stay quiet risked everything. Over time, they became masters of observation, moving through the house silently, noting details without ever being noticed. The family, meanwhile, often had no idea how much was actually seen. They believed their home was peaceful because it looked peaceful. Servants, in a sense, became the eyes and ears of the household, quietly maintaining order and witnessing truths that were never spoken aloud. The architecture of the house helped enforce this silence. Thick carpets muted footsteps. Heavy curtains absorbed sound. Solid doors kept private conversations contained. Gas lamps cast a warm, soft glow rather than harsh light, creating calm and shadows that made movement subtle. The house itself trained its inhabitants to stay calm, polite, and careful with every action. At night, the effect was even stronger. The family slept upstairs, safe and undisturbed. Downstairs, the servants moved quietly, tending fires, preparing meals for the next day, or cleaning rooms. The house was alive with movement, but it felt silent. Shadows flickered along the walls. Floors creaked softly under careful steps. Every corridor, every hidden staircase, every corner carried the rhythm of work unseen. A Victorian house was more than a home. It was a stage, and the servants were the invisible performers keeping it running. They had to be fast, silent, and precise, blending into the background while making life above stairs appear effortless. Every soft step, every whisper, every extinguished candle was part of a system of quiet control. Even the family's private habits were managed by this invisible force. The servants knew who preferred their tea strong, who liked a warm fire in the morning, who slept late and who rose early. They moved, arranged, polished, and adjusted constantly, keeping the household functioning smoothly without ever drawing attention to themselves. The calmness of a Victorian house was therefore not natural, it was carefully orchestrated. Every gesture of order, every polished surface, every quiet room was the result of countless hours of invisible work. And the servants, though unseen, were the ones holding everything together. By the end of the day, when the lamps glowed softly and the house seemed still, every room reflected the care, attention, and silent labor that had gone into it. Guests or the family might notice the comfort and calm, but they would never see the network of invisible observers that made it possible. Every secret, every small drama, every unnoticed detail had been managed and contained without a single word spoken. The house felt calm, orderly, and polished, but underneath that surface, it had been alive all day with silent work, quiet observation, and careful attention. The servants had kept the household running, maintained the family's image, and silently witnessed the life of the house. Every private glance, every whispered worry, every small human drama that the polished walls concealed. By nightfall, the world outside might have seemed peaceful, but inside, the house held the weight of everything that had happened during the day, and the servants, moving quietly through corridors, extinguishing candles and locking doors, ensured that life above stairs remained calm, orderly, and undisturbed. The quiet world behind closed doors was a place of discipline, observation, and invisible work. It was a world where appearances mattered more than reality, and where silence was the most important rule of all. The house slept, but it had been alive all day, and the servants' silent vigilance had preserved the illusion of perfection until the very last lamp flickered out. Victorian houses weren't just built to look impressive. Every wall, staircase, and corridor had a purpose beyond what the eye could see. In fact, some rooms and passageways were designed specifically to hide things, people, and even secrets. The architecture itself played a silent role in the household. Separate staircases for servants allowed them to move quickly between floors without ever crossing paths with the family. A footman could deliver hot water to a bedroom, or a maid could carry clean laundry upstairs, all without being noticed. Guests admired the polished floors and elegant rooms, but they never saw the secret rotes that made the house function smoothly. Hidden corridors were another clever feature. Some were so narrow that only a small person could squeeze through. Others led to storage rooms or private chambers allowing servants to move supplies or overhear events without being spotted. These corridors were quiet lifelines of the house, carrying messages, meals, and even minor emergencies from one wing to another in perfect secrecy. Bell systems added another layer of invisible control. From the dining room or family bedrooms, the family could summon a servant without raising their voice. A soft tinkle or a mechanical pull of a string signaled a footman or maid to attend, almost like magic. The servants responded immediately, often appearing with a tray or message before anyone else realized the bell had even rung. It kept the household efficient and maintained the illusion that everything upstairs ran by itself. But it wasn't just about efficiency. These architectural features enforced a social ruling servants were meant to be unseen and unheard. The family above stairs rarely thought about them as individuals. A maid might polish a mirror, adjust a curtain, or refill a kettle, all while blending into the background. Footsteps were silent, voices low, and movements precise. The house itself seemed to demand this invisibility, with hidden paths, soft carpets, and doors that muffled sound. Even the nighttime atmosphere of these houses encouraged quiet. Floors creaked softly under careful steps. Gaslight flickered against polished furniture, casting long, dancing shadows. The gentle glow illuminated corridors just enough for a maid to move a tray without tipping it over, or for a footman to open a door without disturbing the family's sleep. Every element, from the layout to the lighting, worked together to keep the household's secrets safe and the servants hidden. The design wasn't only practical, it reflected a philosophy. Victorian families believed that maintaining order, discretion, and respectability was essential. A visible or noisy servant could disrupt that image. So the house itself became a tool to enforce social norms, subtly guiding everyone within it, the family upstairs to behave properly, and the servants downstairs to perform flawlessly without ever being noticed. Rooms were arranged carefully to separate public and private spaces. Parlours, dining rooms, and reception areas were designed for guests and family display, always tidy and inviting. Bedrooms, studies, and private chambers were more secluded, yet still connected to the servants through hidden corridors or service staircases. This separation ensured that the household could run smoothly while preserving appearances, keeping the family's life orderly and, importantly, secret. Even small details mattered. Cupboards, wardrobes, and storage areas often contained more than just supplies. They could hide letters, valuables, or messages. Some houses even had secret compartments built into walls or floors, perfectly concealed, ensuring that sensitive items remained invisible to visitors. Servants knew where these were, and their discretion meant nothing ever leaked. The house itself also dictated behavior. Narrow hallways required careful walking. Hidden staircases demanded precise movement. Even gas lamps flickered in ways that encouraged subtlety. The structure of the building, combined with social rules, trained servants to move like shadows, to observe without being seen, and to act quickly without drawing attention. It was a silent choreography that ran all day, every day. In such a house, a creaking floor wasn't just noise, it was a potential accident, a moment that could reveal a servant's presence. A poorly lit hallway could lead to spilled water, a tipped tray, or a misdelivered message. Precision, awareness, and discipline were necessary at all times. The house demanded it, and the servants delivered it. Yet, despite the strict control, there was also a rhythm and a quiet beauty to life within these walls. Servants moved like parts of a machine, coordinated and almost invisible, while the family above stairs enjoyed comfort, warmth, and elegance. The interplay of structure and service created a seamless world where everything looked effortless, though it was anything but. By the time night fell, the house seemed perfectly still. Fires glowed softly, corridors were empty, and rooms reflected the care and precision of countless invisible hands. Every hidden staircase, every bell, every narrow corridor had played its part in keeping the household running and the secrets safe. A Victorian house was not just a home, it was a carefully designed system of privacy, control, and invisible labor. Its architecture, its lighting, its hidden roots, and even the sounds it allowed or muffled, all enforced the rules of silence, discretion, and service. Life upstairs appeared calm and orderly, but it was the design itself, combined with the skill of the servants, that preserved this perfect image. The house slept finally, quiet and imposing, as if nothing had stirred all day. But in truth, it had been alive with movement, precision, and quiet vigilance. The walls had guided, the floors had warned, and the hidden corridors had carried the lifeblood of the household. Every secret, every careful step, and every unnoticed gesture had been contained within its walls, maintaining the delicate balance that made a Victorian home both beautiful and mysterious. In a Victorian household, the servants were not just a random bunch of people moving about. They were a well-structured society under one roof, with ranks, rules, and a silent code that everyone followed. If a house ran smoothly, it was largely because this hierarchy existed and functioned without fail. At the very top was the butler. He was the silent king of the formal areas, the dining room, the wine cellar, and often the front hall. A butler's movements were precise. He supervised footmen, organized meals, and ensured that every detail met the family's high standards. He rarely raised his voice, yet his presence was felt everywhere. One wrong step by a junior servant, and the butler would quietly correct it, instantly maintaining order. Alongside him, and sometimes in parallel, was the housekeeper. She ruled the domestic side of the home. Bedrooms, laundry, cleaning schedules, everything fell under her supervision. Maids feared her strictness, but respected her unmatched efficiency. The housekeeper's word was law when it came to discipline, and her guidance ensured that no room, linen, or curtain ever failed to meet the household's invisible standards. Beneath them were the senior servants' footmen, senior maids, and the head cook. Footmen were often young men tasked with serving at tables, attending to guests, and running errands. Grace, posture, and politeness were as important as speed and precision. Senior maids supervised the cleaning staff, polished silver, arranged flowers, and ensured bedrooms looked flawless. They were the eyes of the housekeeper when it came to domestic order. Kitchen staff, led by the head cook, managed meals, fires, baking, and the constant flow of work that kept the family fed. They worked physically harder than anyone else in the house, but their role was crucial to the family's comfort. Below them came the junior servants' errand boys, young maids, and trainees. They fetched water, cleaned windows, polished shoes, and carried out the smallest tasks. Life for them was exhausting. Every movement had to be perfect. Every order followed without question. One mistake could cost them their job or earn a stern reprimand. Promotions were rare, earned only by skill, discretion, and careful observation of the household's unspoken rules. Hierarchy wasn't just about control, it also managed information. Seniors watched juniors closely, noting strengths and weaknesses. Juniors learned by observing seniors, understanding how tasks were done and which habits kept them in favor. Mistakes were quietly corrected, lessons were absorbed, and efficiency became a silent language that kept the house running smoothly. Discipline was strict. A mispolished tray, a dropped letter, or a delayed delivery could disrupt the household's perfect flow. Seniors corrected these errors immediately, without fuss, ensuring no flaw ever reached the family's eyes. Silence, discretion, and efficiency were the foundation of the hierarchy. Yet hierarchy also brought hidden power. The butler controlled access to certain areas, knew the family's private routines, and subtly influenced events in the formal parts of the house. The housekeeper managed bedrooms, laundry, and clothing, giving her quiet authority over the domestic sphere. Even junior staff could gain small influence if they earned trust, such as being allowed to carry out tasks their peers could not. This structure also shaped relationships among servants. Friendships, rivalries, and small alliances formed quietly. A junior might gain favor with a senior, earning privileges like lighter duties or small freedoms. Jealousy and competition existed, but open conflict was rare because it could jeopardize the smooth functioning of the household. Everyone had to follow the unspoken rules of respect and discretion. Hierarchy came to life most clearly during crises. Fires that needed stoking, spills that had to be cleaned immediately, or urgent messages that had to be delivered, all required servants to follow the chain of command. Every role was defined, and every step was crucial. The family rarely realized how much depended on these invisible rules. Even at night, the hierarchy maintained order. While the family slept upstairs, the servants moved in their ranks below. The butler ensured wine and dining areas were in order. The housekeeper checked bedrooms and oversaw any cleaning. Juniors ran errands, polished floors, or managed small chores in a rhythm that kept the house alive without disturbing the quiet above. Ironically, the very people who were least seen were the ones who saw the most. They witnessed arguments, secret glances, private letters, and minor accidents. Yet their role required complete silence. What they observed was invisible to the family, but it allowed the household to function without a single disruption. Hierarchy also gave servants a sense of pride and control. Each task performed correctly, each meal delivered perfectly, and each polished room reflected their skill. They may have been invisible to the family, but the servants knew the value of their work. Maintaining the household's perfection became a silent achievement, a quiet power within the walls of the house. Efficiency, discipline and hierarchy also created a culture of awareness. Servants knew who preferred certain routines, who was sensitive, and who might react poorly if disturbed. This knowledge guided their actions and ensured the family's comfort. They became experts not just in work, but in human behavior, observing, predicting, and acting without ever being noticed. Even minor mistakes could have consequences. A footman dropping a tray, a maid forgetting to polish a window, or a junior leaving a door open could create chaos if not quickly corrected. The hierarchy ensured that tasks were completed perfectly and errors rarely escaped unnoticed. The family enjoyed comfort and order, unaware of the constant vigilance beneath their feet. By the end of the day, when lamps glowed softly and corridors were quiet, the house reflected the work, discipline, and coordination of the hierarchy. Every room, every polished surface, every subtle adjustment was a product of careful organization and silent labor. The family's image of calm and perfection depended entirely on the servants' invisible social system. The servant hierarchy was more than ranks and rules. It was a carefully maintained ecosystem of observation, discipline, and quiet authority, holding the household together and preserving the family's image. Upstairs, everything looked effortless. Downstairs, the hierarchy ensured that effort, skill, and secrecy were maintained at all times, invisible but essential. In a Victorian house, the day for servants started long before the sun appeared. While the family above slept peacefully, the corridors below were already alive with quiet movement. Waking early wasn't just a routine, it was a rule. Being punctual and efficient was the difference between a smooth household and chaos. The first sounds of the day were subtle: a soft creak of a door, the faint clatter of a tray, the gentle shuffle of shoes on carpet. Junior maids carried water from the well or the water tank, while footmen made their way to the kitchen to check fires and stoke them. The house was dim, illuminated only by the flicker of gas lamps or early morning light seeping through curtains. Every movement had to be careful. A dropped pan or loud step could wake the family, and that was always to be avoided. The kitchen was the heart of this early morning rhythm. Cooks and kitchen maids began preparations for breakfast, often cooking over wood or coal fires that needed constant attention. Bread had to rise, porridge stirred, tea kettles watched closely. The smells of baking and brewing filled the air, but the sounds remained soft, almost like whispers, to keep the house calm. Upstairs, bedrooms required precise attention. Maids made beds with military-like exactness, smoothing sheets, arranging pillows, and ensuring no wrinkle disrupted the family's perfect appearance. Windows were opened carefully to air the rooms, but curtains had to fall back into place without a flap that could startle a sleeping resident. The smallest details mattered. A misaligned sheet, a crooked pillow, or a missed fold could trigger a reprimand from the housekeeper. The hierarchy dictated movement. Senior servants supervised juniors, correcting mistakes quietly and efficiently. A footman would check that water was delivered properly, while a senior maid might ensure that the breakfast table was set perfectly. Every task had its order, every step carefully planned. There was no rushing, no loud talking, and no wasted motion. Efficiency was silent, precise, and expected. Some tasks were repetitive but essential. Fires had to be maintained in multiple rooms, coal shoveled and ash cleaned, candles lit in hallways. Breakfast had to be ready at the right time, cups and plates polished, food served exactly as the family preferred. Each task was a small cog in a larger machine, and each servant had to play their part flawlessly. Beyond the physical work, servants also had to be emotionally alert. Observing the family's moods was critical. Who was grumpy before tea? Who liked their morning letters brought quietly? Who might want extra coal in the fire? These details determined the servant's approach. Acting efficiently meant being aware, adaptable, and invisible at the same time. While the family slowly woke, the house had already transformed. Hallways were polished, fires were lit, and breakfast was ready, all before anyone stirred from their bed. The rhythm of the morning was seamless, a dance performed quietly and without fuss. To the family, the house simply felt perfect, cozy, and calm. To the servants, it was the result of careful planning, early rising, and strict discipline. Morning errands extended beyond the house itself. Juniors might carry messages to nearby neighbors or suppliers, or fetch fresh milk and bread from the street. Footmen could deliver parcels discreetly. Everything had to be done with efficiency, and timing was everything. A late delivery or missing item could ripple into bigger issues. So punctuality was more than courtesy, it was survival. The early hours also allowed servants a small window for preparation. They could review the day's tasks, polish tools, check laundry, and ensure everything was in order before the family became fully awake. This quiet time was essential for maintaining control over the day ahead. Even though it required discipline and hard work, there was a certain rhythm to it that gave the servants confidence. They knew the household would function perfectly if they performed their roles correctly. As the sun began to rise, the house transformed yet again. Light spilled through windows, rooms warmed, and the family slowly appeared. Breakfast was served, fires tended, and every detail seemed effortless. Guests or family members might have noticed nothing unusual, but the servants had already orchestrated hours of silent, precise labor. Every corner, every corridor, every detail had been checked, polished, and prepared. The quiet world behind closed doors was always alive before the sun. The household functioned like a well-oiled machine, each servant performing their role without applause, without recognition, and without ever being noticed. Their work kept appearances flawless, lives comfortable, and routines uninterrupted. By mid-morning, the family had begun their day, and the servants continued their silent vigilance. Yet the memory of those early hours, the careful movements, soft footsteps, and precise choreography remained the backbone of the household. Every day began before anyone else stirred, proving that in a Victorian house, life was quietly orchestrated, and perfection demanded discipline, awareness, and work unseen. The house now felt alive with light and gentle activity, but the foundations of its calm, polished appearance had been laid in the earliest, quietest hours. And in that stillness, the servants' dedication and skill ensured that the household could function flawlessly, keeping the family's life orderly and serene. without a single word spoken above stairs. In every Victorian house, the family above stairs lived in a bubble of calm and elegance. Guests admired the polished floors, the tidy rooms, and the quiet manners. But below stairs, the servants were like invisible listeners, always aware of more than anyone realized. They overheard things that the family assumed would never be noticed. Servants knew the small secrets, whispered arguments, hushed instructions, or a nervous cough before a difficult conversation. Families spoke softly, thinking the walls kept them safe. But the house was full of hidden corridors, thin partitions, and attentive ears. A footman passing quietly in a hallway might catch a snippet of a plan. A maid folding laundry could hear a whispered complaint. Every movement was careful, every word carried weight. Financial worries were often overheard first. Families discussed debts, overdue bills, or lost investments in what they believed was privacy. A servant might pause just out of view, listening as the head of the house muttered numbers or the lady fretted over letters. While they never revealed what they heard, they adjusted their work to avoid interrupting sensitive moments, ensuring letters were discreetly filed, keeping doors closed, or moving quietly so as not to draw attention. Romantic secrets were another common theme. The servants saw stolen glances, overheard hushed promises, and witnessed nervous exchanges that the family assumed were private. An affair, a secret engagement, or a clandestine visitor could all be noticed from the shadows. Servants were trained to observe, but never comment. Their silence protected the family's reputation while allowing them to understand exactly what was happening upstairs. Children's disputes were also a constant source of private knowledge. Arguments over toys, lessons, or privileges echoed down the staircases. Junior maids often heard more about family dynamics than the parents realized. They knew who was naughty, who was upset, and who required gentle attention. Even small disagreements could reveal larger tensions, and the servants learned to move carefully to avoid interfering while staying informed. Servants also overheard hidden conflicts between adults. Siblings quarreled over inheritances. Spouses whispered about misunderstandings, and friends visiting in confidence shared private news. These moments were usually quiet, but attentive servants picked up on tone, pauses, and emphasis. They learned to anticipate moods, prepare rooms, and act accordingly, sometimes preventing arguments from escalating or making sure delicate conversations went unnoticed. Meals and social gatherings provided another opportunity. As the family prepared for guests, servants overheard instructions, last-minute changes, and discreet worries. Make sure the table is set perfectly. A lady might whisper, or don't let anyone see the cellar. A gentleman might murmur. Footmen and maids adjusted silently, ensuring everything appeared flawless while absorbing information about private matters. Even private letters or messages could be overheard. If someone dictated a letter aloud, a servant might quietly hear the content. If a message was delivered in secret, servants sometimes glimpsed the sender or recipient without being noticed. These observations were always stored quietly, remembered only to assist the household in maintaining order and discretion. Some overheard moments were unexpectedly humorous. A gentleman might trip over words while proposing, a child might reveal an embarrassing secret, or a guest might fluster themselves with nerves. Servants often suppressed chuckles, moving silently to keep appearances intact. They saw the human side of the family, the awkward, the imperfect, the very private moments, and yet never let these slip to anyone else. Nighttime conversations were especially revealing. Late at night, the house was quiet, the family believed they were private, and secrets flowed more freely. Servants moving through corridors or adjusting fires sometimes heard whispered worries, confessions, or plans. They became skilled at distinguishing what required action, what could be ignored, and what needed utmost discretion. The servant's ability to overhear without being seen created a delicate balance. They were the silent eyes and ears of the house. They knew too much to speak freely, and yet their knowledge allowed them to keep the household running smoothly. A misplaced word or accidental comment could ruin appearances, so they moved carefully, listened attentively, and acted with precision. Overhearing also taught them about human nature. They learned how people whispered when nervous, how a voice trembled with excitement or fear, and how silence could be as telling as words. This knowledge gave them subtle power. They could anticipate needs, prevent mistakes, and maintain calm before anyone above stairs even realized a problem existed. By the end of the day, the house seemed calm, orderly, and peaceful. The family might never know how much the servants had heard. The hidden worries, small dramas, secret plans, or whispered arguments. Yet the servants carried this knowledge silently, allowing life upstairs to appear perfect. Their observation was invisible but essential. Every overheard word, every subtle tone, every whispered secret was part of their invisible labor. The house settled into quiet by night, but it carried the weight of the day's hidden conversations. The family slept in comfort, unaware of the secrets the walls had held, and the servants, moving silently through the darkened corridors, ensured that every overheard word remained unseen, every secret remained protected, and every illusion of calm above stairs stayed perfectly intact. Victorian society was obsessed with appearances. Outwardly, families were polite, polite conversations flowed, and every house looked calm and orderly. But behind those polished doors, life was far from perfect. Scandals, big and small, quietly unfolded every day, and the servants saw it all. Some scandals were about money. Families often looked wealthy, but bills, debts, and lost investments lurked in drawers and ledgers. Arguments about finances were whispered in private rooms, meant for no one's ears but the walls themselves. Servants, moving silently through corridors, overheard these worries. They knew who was worried, who was frustrated, and who was desperate to hide the truth. Yet they never spoke a word. Their discretion preserved appearances, allowing the family to keep up the illusion of calm and prosperity. Romantic secrets were another hidden layer. Affairs, secret engagements, or late night meetings occurred quietly in private chambers. Lovers whispered, letters were exchanged secretly, and glances were stolen. Servants noticed these subtle gestures. A hand held too long, a note tucked away, a visitor arriving at odd hours. Their awareness never interfered. It only ensured that no scandal reached the public eye. Even family disputes were often hidden. Siblings argued behind closed doors, parents disagreed quietly, and minor incidents could reveal larger tensions. Servants overheard these quarrels but remained invisible. Their silent presence allowed tempers to flare safely, knowing that no outsider would witness the conflict. This quiet vigilance was essential in maintaining the household's perfect image. Illness and personal struggles were also kept private. Mental health issues, sadness, or anxiety were never discussed openly in polite society. A lady of the house might cry alone, a gentleman might brood in silence, and children could fret over worries they could not express. Servants were often the only ones who knew the full story, and they acted carefully to preserve both comfort and dignity. Even social events carried hidden dramas. Preparations for dinner parties or gatherings required immense coordination, and servants often overheard tensions, last-minute changes, or private concerns. A guest might fidget, a host might whisper instructions, or a small argument could occur in a quiet corner. Servants managed it all, adjusting arrangements, moving discreetly, and ensuring everything appeared flawless. The house itself often aided secrecy. Hidden corridors, separate staircases, and secret compartments allowed letters, valuables, or messages to move unseen. Servants were masters of these pathways, understanding the architecture's role in concealing family matters. Their knowledge turned every corner into a safeguard for privacy. Minor mistakes could also become scandals if unnoticed. A broken vase, a spilled drink, or a misplaced item could hint at disorder. Servants quickly corrected these small mishaps, maintaining the calm facade above stairs. Every careful movement, polished surface, and corrected error contributed to the household's illusion of perfection. Servants developed a silent network among themselves. They observed, shared tips, and coordinated actions to prevent accidents or exposure of private matters. Through this quiet teamwork, scandals remained hidden. Every gesture, whether holding a door open, carrying a tray, or discreetly delivering a message, was part of a larger system of unseen control. They also witnessed moments of raw human emotion. A whispered confession, a private tear, or a suppressed laugh revealed the life behind the formal manners. These glimpses, though invisible to outsiders, reminded the servants that even the most polished household held ordinary, human stories. Victorian rules themselves created some scandals. Suppressing emotions, hiding desires, and maintaining appearances often caused tension. Servants observed these pressures and acted accordingly, moving carefully to avoid disruption and ensuring the household's calm exterior remained intact. By evening, the house appeared serene and orderly. Guests and family might never notice the minor dramas that had occurred, yet the servants carried the knowledge silently, maintaining the delicate balance between life's messy reality and society's expectations. Their work ensured that every scandal, every hidden worry, every private dispute remained invisible, even as the lamps flickered softly and hallways grew quiet. The weight of the day's secrets lingered in the walls. The family slept, the house appeared perfect, and the world outside remained unaware of the hidden chaos inside. Servants moved silently, closing doors, adjusting furniture, and keeping every secret carefully tucked away. The house seemed calm, but it had lived a full day of hidden stories. Every financial worry, romantic intrigue, private quarrel, and small disaster had been managed with care and discretion. The servants' silent vigilance ensured that society would never glimpse the imperfections of life above stairs. By nightfall, everything appeared still, orderly, and pristine. But the truth remained alive in the corridors, the hidden rooms, and the careful movements of those below. The household's calm, polished image was a result of invisible labor, careful observation, and the constant effort of servants who saw everything but said nothing. The house slept, but it had been alive with secrets all day, preserved carefully and silently. And in that quiet, the life of the family above stairs remained perfect, untouched by the hidden dramas that had quietly unfolded and been contained by the servants' tireless vigilance. Victorian England loved rules. Politeness, manners, and morality were not just ideals, they were almost like laws. People believed in doing everything properly, showing respect, and maintaining appearances. From the outside, life looked controlled, upright, and flawless. But behind closed doors, the reality was often far more complicated. The moral code of the time was strict, especially for the family upstairs. Women were expected to be modest, kind, and elegant, while men were supposed to be serious, composed, and respectable. Everyone followed invisible rules about what could be said, done, or even thought. Public life and private life were two very different things, and servants often saw both sides. Servants quickly learned that what appeared moral wasn't always moral. The family might smile politely at a dinner guest, yet whisper complaints about their neighbors or family disputes behind closed doors. A gentleman might lecture on honor while negotiating deals that were far from honest. Ladies of the house might appear serene and composed while hiding personal frustrations, romances, or resentments. The servants became silent witnesses to this duality. They noticed inconsistencies between the polished image and the real behavior. Whispers, subtle gestures, secret meetings, or hidden letters all revealed that morality was sometimes more about appearances than truth. But the servant's role was simple: observe, act discreetly, and ensure the household remained orderly. Morality in the house was carefully choreographed. A slip could create embarrassment, ruin reputations, or invite gossip. Every action was scrutinized, consciously or unconsciously, by both the family and society. Servants understood this and learned to predict reactions, prevent accidents, and preserve appearances without ever being noticed themselves. Even small details reflected the moral expectations. Bedrooms had to be tidy, letters unreadable to others, and private spaces respected. Guests were treated politely, tables were set perfectly, and conversations were polite. The servants' quiet vigilance made all this possible. Without them, even the strictest moral standards could collapse under the weight of human imperfection. The house itself reinforced morality. Its architecture, separate staircases, hidden corridors, and quiet rooms allowed privacy and control. Servants could maintain discretion, ensuring that secrets, missteps, or minor scandals never became public. Gas lamps, polished floors, and soft curtains created a calm environment that encouraged polite behavior. Every element worked together to uphold the family's image of uprightness. However, morality was not always natural. It was enforced. Family members had to follow rules constantly, often suppressing emotions, desires, or impulses. Servants saw this suppression firsthand, a glance exchanged too long, a whispered complaint, a letter delivered in secrecy. They knew that the perfect image was a performance, and they silently supported it. At meals, moral rules were obvious but sometimes deceptive. Table manners were strict, yet a hushed argument over money, inheritance, or romance might happen under the same roof. Servants moving carefully between rooms picked up on tone, pauses, and body language. They learned to serve without interrupting, observing without being noticed, and keeping the household running smoothly. Victorian morality also shaped how servants behaved. Their own actions were guided by strict rules, silence, discretion, and loyalty. They could not share what they heard or saw, even if it was shocking. Maintaining the household's image required more than work. It demanded complete control over information and movement. Their silence became a moral duty of its own. Even personal habits were controlled. Women and men had to follow dress codes, wake early, and perform daily routines in a way that reinforced decorum. Any lapse could be noticed and judged. Servants, who knew all the secrets, ensured that appearances remained intact, from polished shoes to perfectly aligned curtains. By the end of the day, the family appeared calm, proper, and morally upright. Guests and society saw only order, respectability, and kindness. But the servants knew better. They understood that morality was not just a belief, it was a performance supported by silent labor, observation, and discretion. The house settled into quiet at night. Fires glowed softly, lamps flickered, and hallways were empty. The moral order above stairs was maintained not only by the family, but by the invisible vigilance of the servants. Every smile, gesture, and polished surface reflected not only effort but careful management of appearances. Victorian morality, as seen from below stairs, was less about truth and more about control, discretion, and appearances. And it was the servants, quietly moving through corridors, attending to details, and observing without comment, who ensured that this moral facade remained unbroken, calm, and flawless. Victorian society expected women to be calm, composed, and elegant at all times. Their world was polished and graceful, but behind those carefully arranged curtains, life was often far from perfect. The women of the house carried burdens that few people, even their own family, truly understood. Daily life was filled with endless duties. Managing the household meant overseeing every detail of rooms, meals, and guests. Letters had to be written politely, visitors greeted graciously, and social appearances maintained perfectly. There was little room for personal desires or mistakes. A dropped handkerchief or a slightly rumpled dress could attract subtle disapproval or judgment. Women were also expected to manage the family's emotional climate. Husbands, children, and visiting relatives relied on them to maintain harmony. Yet they rarely had the freedom to express frustration or sadness openly. Crying, shouting, or complaining was considered improper. Instead, emotions were kept hidden, tucked away behind polite smiles and carefully arranged rooms. Servants often noticed these hidden struggles: a sigh while folding laundry, a nervous glance at a letter, or a quiet pause before speaking. Romantic and personal desires were even more complicated. Marriage and courtship were tightly regulated by social expectations. Love, disappointment, and frustration were often private, whispered only in the bedroom or carefully hidden in letters. Servants sometimes observed these moments, understanding which woman was anxious, lonely, or secretly excited about news from afar. They could not intervene, only move quietly, maintain discretion, and keep the household running smoothly. Even daily routines were exhausting. Women rose early to dress and prepare for the day. Clothes were often heavy, layered, and restrictive. Corsets pressed tightly, skirts swished with every step, and layers of petticoats made movement a chore. Yet these physical constraints were only part of the challenge. Every gesture, posture, and expression had to reflect calm, grace, and composure. Servants learned to anticipate needs: water for tea, warm fires, fresh flowers, while moving invisibly through the household. Privacy was rare. Every room could have a hidden ear or a silent observer. Servants, while performing their duties, often overheard personal conversations, private worries, or hidden confessions. Women learned to speak quietly, write letters discreetly, and manage secrets with care. Even small mistakes or lapses in composure could ripple into embarrassment or gossip if noticed by guests or family members. Health was another hidden struggle. Victorian women often endured chronic discomfort from restrictive clothing, illness, or fatigue. Physical labor, such as attending to children or supervising household preparations, could take its toll. Yet complaints were rarely voiced openly, for propriety demanded silence and endurance. Servants, moving carefully through corridors and rooms, often became the only witnesses to these quiet struggles. Social pressure amplified these burdens. Hosting gatherings, maintaining appearances, and managing etiquette required constant attention. Every meal, conversation, and invitation was a performance. Servants noticed nervous gestures, small sighs, and hurried movements as women balanced family, social expectations, and personal feelings, all while preserving the household's outward perfection. Even leisure was constrained. Reading, writing, or creative pursuits were limited and must be conducted with decorum. Moments of joy were small, private, and fleeting. Servants often observed the subtle routines that allowed women to find brief relief: a quiet moment by the window, a hidden letter from a friend, or a private sip of tea while no one watched. The hidden suffering of women upstairs was both emotional and physical. Every day, they performed a delicate balancing act, maintaining grace, managing family and social expectations, and enduring the limitations imposed by society. Servants, invisible observers of this world, learned to respect and anticipate these struggles, providing quiet support without ever intruding. By nightfall, after a long day of duties, social interaction, and careful appearances, the house grew quiet. Fires glowed softly, curtains fell into place, and the women retreated to their private chambers. Their suffering, though hidden, shaped the household. Every careful gesture, whispered thought, and unspoken worry remained contained behind closed doors, carried silently in the presence of those who served them. The house appeared calm, orderly, and perfect to visitors and family alike. Yet the hidden struggles of the women upstairs were real, constant, and quietly endured. The servants, moving invisibly through the halls, ensured that nothing disrupted this delicate balance, preserving the image of elegance and propriety while silently witnessing the weight of hidden burdens. The nursery in a Victorian house was more than just a playroom. It was a world of its own, full of laughter, tears, whispers, and secrets, most of which the adults above stairs would never know. Children might seem carefree, but behind the doors of the nursery, life was full of lessons, small dramas, and unspoken rules. The children were often under strict supervision, yet the nursery was their private kingdom. Nannies and nurses watched over them, guiding play, managing mischief, and enforcing rules. These caregivers were more than just employees. They were confidants, observers, and silent keepers of the children's secrets. They knew when a child was frightened, excited, jealous, or planning a minor prank, and they acted without drawing attention from the family. Arguments over toys, privileges, or attention were common. A stolen doll, a quarrel over a game, or a secret hiding spot could spark conflict that only the nursery staff fully understood. Servants had to intervene quietly, preventing escalation while preserving the children's trust and autonomy. Every decision required subtlety. Too much interference could undermine authority. Too little could result in chaos. Lessons were strict but private. Reading, writing, and etiquette were taught within the nursery, and mistakes could be embarrassing for the child. Nannies often overheard whispered questions, secret attempts to practice a song, or quiet confessions of fear or shame. They adjusted their guidance carefully, ensuring learning progressed without humiliating the child, while maintaining the outward appearance of calm order. Children also observed the household in ways adults rarely considered. They noticed minor quarrels, glimpsed hidden rooms, and sometimes picked up whispered conversations between servants or family members. These observations were curious and instinctive, forming a secret world of understanding about the house and its rules. Servants watched closely, protecting children from information they weren't ready for while also keeping the household secrets intact. Health was a constant concern. Sick children needed discreet care to prevent panic or worry spreading to other parts of the house. Nannies administered medicine, monitored fevers, and soothed fears, all quietly, without disrupting the calm image of the home. Even minor illnesses were treated with care, and servants ensured that no accident or sound disturbed the household above. The nursery also held hidden joys and small rebellions. Secret games, whispered stories, and tiny adventures occurred when adults were elsewhere. Children hid small treasures, scribbled notes, or exchanged secrets among themselves. These moments were fleeting but meaningful, creating a private world of imagination within the structured life of the household. Servants witnessed these carefully, knowing when to intervene and when to allow the child's autonomy. Moods and emotions were often amplified in the nursery. Tantrums, tears, Giggles and whispers were daily occurrences. Servants learned to interpret the signs. A clenched fist meant frustration. A trembling lip hinted at sadness. A quiet giggle signaled a hidden joke. Acting appropriately required awareness, timing, and discretion. One wrong move could escalate conflict or reveal secrets to the wrong person. Even bedtime was an intricate process. Nannies prepared children for sleep with careful attention, warm baths, clean nightclothes, stories read in hushed tones, and quiet reassurances. Every child needed individual care, yet the household's rhythm demanded silence and order. The servants moved like shadows, providing comfort while maintaining the calm above stairs. By evening, the nursery settled into quiet. Toys were put away, whispers faded, and small beds held sleeping children. Yet the room carried the weight of the day's small dramas, secret joys, and private lessons. The caregivers knew the truth. The nursery was a place of life, learning, and emotion, hidden from the eyes of the world. The house, above and below, appeared calm and orderly, but the nursery had its own pulse, a rhythm of laughter, tears, and secrets. Servants and nannies ensured that these private moments remained protected, that children grew safely, and that the household's perfect image stayed intact. The quiet vigilance of those below stairs preserved both order and the hidden life of the children, maintaining a delicate balance between freedom and discipline, chaos and calm. In a Victorian house, the governess held a strange and unique position. She wasn't part of the family, yet she wasn't a servant either. She walked a delicate line between authority and invisibility, teaching the children while navigating social hierarchies carefully. Her life was a constant balance of observation, discipline, and social isolation. A governess typically came from a respectable, educated background but had little money. She was hired to educate the children in manners, reading, writing, and sometimes music or foreign languages. Unlike nannies or nurses, her focus was strictly on learning and moral guidance. She commanded respect in theory, but in practice, she often found herself caught between the children's parents and the household's staff. In the house, the governess was visible enough to enforce lessons, but invisible enough to remain detached. She dined separately, sat apart from the family, and was often excluded from social interactions. Servants sometimes treated her awkwardly, neither fully subordinate nor fully an equal, because her position didn't fit neatly into the hierarchy. She was in a liminal space, expected to manage the children, but without the camaraderie or protection that family or senior staff might provide. Daily life for a governess was structured but isolating. She rose early, often before the children, to prepare lessons. She monitored their progress, corrected misbehavior, and ensured they adhered to the strict moral and educational standards of the time. At the same time, she had to maintain discretion about household secrets she might overhear. Whispers of family tensions, hidden financial worries, or private matters were common, and speaking out could jeopardize her position. Discipline was one of the governess's hardest tasks. Victorian children were expected to be polite, obedient, and attentive. Any lapse, tantrums, misbehavior, or disobedience reflected poorly not only on the child but also on the governess. She had to correct mistakes firmly but tactfully, ensuring lessons were learned without creating rebellion or resentment. This required patience, awareness, and often a quiet cunning. The governess also had to navigate the delicate relationship between family and servants. She was not a peer to the parents, so her authority was limited in social matters. She was not a servant, so she was excluded from household gossip and camaraderie. Servants sometimes tested boundaries, deliberately or unconsciously, seeing whether she could maintain control. She learned to act decisively, quietly, and with dignity, commanding respect while remaining within her delicate social role. Privacy was another challenge. Governesses were often alone with children in rooms with thin walls. Conversations above stairs, secrets in the nursery, or minor scandals could be overheard. She had to listen carefully, decide what was important, and act without exposing herself or the family. Her discretion was crucial because one careless remark could damage her career or the household's reputation. Despite the isolation, many governesses found moments of influence and satisfaction. They shaped young minds, imparted manners, and guided children through moral and social lessons. Their work was visible in the children's progress, polite behavior, and education. Yet, behind the scenes, their contributions often went unnoticed by the family and unrecognized by society. Socially, the governess had few allies. She was too educated to socialize fully with servants, and too low in status to mingle comfortably with the family. Loneliness was common, and small kindnesses from either side, an approving glance, a brief word of encouragement, could make a world of difference. Her resilience, patience, and skill were her tools to survive this unique position. The house itself reflected her role. She occupied a middle space, private rooms near the children, quiet corridors to move between lessons, and limited access to the formal areas where the family entertained guests. This separation reinforced her delicate position. She was integral to the household, yet always marginal. By evening, after lessons, meals, and careful navigation of household politics, the governess often found herself alone, reviewing notes, planning the next day, or quietly reflecting on the delicate social balance she maintained. The children slept, the family relaxed, and the servants moved unseen through the corridors. Yet her presence had influenced every small moment of learning, behavior, and order in the household. In the complex ecosystem of a Victorian home, the governess existed in a liminal space, silently shaping lives, navigating hierarchy, and maintaining discretion. She was neither family nor servant, yet her work was essential to the household's smooth functioning. Every lesson taught, every secret kept, and every careful correction reflected the delicate, invisible labor that allowed the family to maintain its polished appearance. By nightfall, the house appeared calm and orderly, but the governess, like the servants, had worked quietly behind the scenes. She had guided, observed, corrected, and preserved the household's image of perfection, all while existing in a position that was uniquely challenging, uniquely lonely, and uniquely important. Victorian houses were full of secrets, but some of the deepest ones were hidden behind locked doors. Illness, both physical and mental, was often kept private. Families worried about reputation, guests, and society's judgment, so anyone unwell or troubled might be secluded. Servants were the only ones who truly knew what happened behind these locked doors. Illness could range from minor fevers to serious conditions. The family might pretend everything was normal in public, while upstairs, in a quiet bedroom, a child or adult lay sick, attended by a nurse or maid. Servants moved carefully, bringing medicine, warming water, or adjusting blankets, all while avoiding noise or attention. Every detail mattered. A spilled cup, a creaking floor, or an overheard cough could disrupt the illusion of perfect health. Mental illness or nervous disorders were even more secretive. Victorian society often misunderstood or stigmatized such conditions, so families hid affected members away. Locked rooms became common for those deemed troubled or eccentric. Servants were the silent caretakers, attending to needs, observing behaviors, and ensuring that no scandal reached the family's guests or society. In these rooms, servants learned patience and subtlety. They listened for unusual sounds, noticed small changes in mood, and anticipated needs without being seen. They learned how to comfort without drawing attention, how to administer care discreetly, and how to maintain calm in spaces that were sometimes tense or frightening. Their role was both essential and invisible. Isolation could be lonely and frightening for the patient, but the servant's careful attention provided structure and safety. Nurses and junior maids often stayed nearby, ensuring warmth, proper nutrition, and attention to hygiene. They moved quietly, spoke softly, and acted as the only link between the secluded person and the outside world. Locked rooms also reflected social rules and power. Families controlled who could enter, often limiting access to the sick or mentally unwell. Servants respected these rules while performing their duties, knowing that discretion was crucial. One misstep, a careless word, a loud footstep, could compromise the household's image and create gossip that might spread beyond the walls. Even minor ailments were handled with care. Headaches, stomachaches, or small injuries were often treated privately to avoid disruption. Servants learned to anticipate symptoms, prepare remedies, and deliver comfort without alarm. This quiet attentiveness became second nature, a skill that was invisible to outsiders but essential to household harmony. The architecture of the house helped maintain these secrets. Remote bedrooms, hidden staircases, and narrow corridors allowed care to be delivered discreetly. Locked doors prevented curious eyes from entering, while soft carpets and careful lighting ensured that movement was almost silent. The house itself became an accomplice, protecting privacy while enabling invisible labor. Sometimes the servants observed subtle signs of emotional distress. Anxiety, sadness, or fear were often hidden behind polite manners or closed doors. Servants noticed trembling hands, restless pacing, or whispered mutters. They learned when to intervene gently, when to step back, and how to maintain order while respecting privacy. Their work required awareness, tact, and patience. Even emergencies were handled quietly. A sudden fever spike, a fainting spell, or a mental episode required immediate response without alerting the family or guests. Servants moved quickly and efficiently, performing essential tasks while keeping the household calm. Their skill ensured that life above stairs continued uninterrupted. Despite the hidden crises, by nightfall, the locked rooms were quiet. Patients rested, fires glowed softly, and hallways were empty. Servants had spent hours observing, adjusting, and caring without recognition. They had maintained calm, preserved secrets, and ensured the family's image remained flawless. The house seemed orderly and serene, but within those locked doors lay stories of suffering, quiet courage, and invisible labor. Illness, madness, and seclusion were carefully managed by those moving silently behind the scenes. Their work ensured that the household's outward perfection endured, even when life behind closed doors was anything but calm. Victorian households relied on these invisible efforts. Locked rooms concealed vulnerability, while careful servants preserved dignity, health, and privacy. The quiet rhythm of care, observation, and discretion created a hidden world, one that kept the household functioning, appearances intact, and secrets safe. In a Victorian household, death was a constant, though often hidden presence. Families were expected to maintain appearances even during grief. Illness, accidents, or old age could strike, and servants were the silent caretakers of both the dying and the mourning. When a family member became seriously ill, the household adjusted quietly. Rooms were prepared with careworn blankets, flowers, and soothing drinks. Servants moved with gentle precision, tending fires, adjusting light, and monitoring the patient. Every step had to be calm and unobtrusive, preserving dignity and minimizing disruption to the household's routine. Death itself was often a private affair. Families wanted to control the timing of announcements, visitors, and public awareness. Servants carried out the logistics, fetching doctors, preparing the body, and discreetly moving personal belongings. Their work required tact, silence, and efficiency. One wrong word, one loud movement could create panic or gossip, so careful attention was essential. Mourning rituals were intricate and socially significant. Black clothing had to be prepared, rooms arranged, and guests managed. Servants were in charge of many of these details, ensuring that every flower, every curtain, and every chair reflected propriety. They understood the family's emotions, but never let their own feelings interfere. Their focus was always on maintaining order and dignity. Death also revealed hidden family dynamics. Arguments about inheritance, subtle tensions, or whispered regrets could emerge. Servants overheard these quietly, noting who was distressed, anxious, or relieved. They learned to navigate these moments delicately, intervening only when necessary to prevent disruption or maintain appearances. Children were particularly affected. Their grief had to be managed without allowing outbursts that might disturb the household. Nannies and maids comforted them quietly, guiding their emotions while keeping routines intact. Bedtimes, meals, and lessons often continued with subtle adjustments to accommodate sorrow without breaking the household's calm image. Guests visiting during mourning required careful handling. Servants ensured that visitors followed social etiquette, that conversations remained appropriate, and that the family's grief was displayed with proper restraint. Every detail mattered, from the arrangement of chairs to the timing of meals. The household's reputation depended on flawless execution. Even after death, the work continued. Bodies had to be prepared for funerals, letters written, and estates managed. Servants handled these tasks quietly, maintaining decorum and ensuring nothing disrupted the household's outward calm. They were the invisible support, carrying the burden of grief logistics while keeping the family's image intact. The house itself reflected the somber mood. Curtains might be drawn, fires kept low, and lamps softly lit. Hidden corridors allowed discreet movement, ensuring no disturbances. Even in death, the architecture and the servants' silent work preserved order, calm, and dignity. Servants often became the only witnesses to private sorrow. While the family expressed grief selectively, the staff understood its depth and complexity. They comforted, observed, and acted with discretion, maintaining calm while managing chaos behind the scenes. Their role was both practical and emotional, bridging the gap between private loss and public appearance. By nightfall, after preparations, adjustments, and quiet care, the house settled. The family mourned in private, guests departed, and the servants ensured that every detail was perfect. The household appeared composed and orderly, yet behind closed doors lay stories of grief, labour, and quiet vigilance. In Victorian homes, death was never just a personal event, it was a household affair, carefully managed by those who saw everything yet spoke nothing. Servants worked tirelessly, preserving dignity, managing sorrow, and keeping the image of perfection intact. Their silent effort ensured that life above stairs could continue, calm and orderly, even in the shadow of loss. In a Victorian household, the kitchen was the true heart of the home. It was warm, busy, and full of life. But it also held secrets. While the family above stairs might enjoy polished rooms and calm appearances, the servants in the kitchen saw more than anyone realized. Every whisper, every hidden glance, every small drama often passed through those walls first. The kitchen was alive from dawn. Fires crackled, kettles boiled, and pots simmered. Maids chopped vegetables, stirred soups, and baked bread, all while moving quietly so as not to disturb the family. Amidst this bustle, they overheard conversations from the drawing rooms, notes being dictated, and whispered instructions. The kitchen, in a way, became an unofficial listening post for the household. Servants learned quickly that nothing escaped the kitchen. A letter slipped under a door, a child's secret plan, or a minor quarrel above stairs. If it was important, someone in the kitchen would know. Footmen, cooks, and maids shared subtle glances, passed along messages, or adjusted meals according to what they had overheard. Communication was silent, indirect, and careful, but highly effective. The kitchen staff also witnessed human nature at its most honest. Arguments, excitement, and frustration were sometimes revealed in quiet hallways or hidden rooms. Servants understood moods, intentions, and hidden tensions. They moved accordingly, ensuring meals were served at the right moment, fires were tended, and any potential embarrassment stayed contained. Every household ritual passed through the kitchen. Breakfasts, lunches, dinners, and evening teas were carefully orchestrated. The staff had to adjust portions, temperatures, and timings to match the family's moods and whims. A grumpy gentleman might need extra tea. A nervous lady might require careful attention to her meal, and children often demanded special treats. Observing these needs, anticipating reactions, and acting silently was a form of power. Even small accidents revealed hidden truths. A broken dish, a spilled drink, or a missing ingredient could hint at family tensions or minor mistakes. The kitchen staff noticed, corrected, and ensured that nothing reached the family's eyes or disrupted appearances. Their work required constant awareness, subtlety, and coordination. Secrets in the kitchen weren't just practical, they were social. Staff learned to navigate complex relationships. Who could be trusted, whose moods were unpredictable, and when a whispered word might spread inadvertently. Junior maids observed senior staff, learned the unspoken rules, and ensured that every action maintained household harmony. Meals themselves were sometimes used to manage secrets. Special dishes, hidden ingredients, or carefully timed service could influence moods, keep conversations calm, or prevent minor conflicts from escalating. The kitchen, therefore, was not only a place of labor, but also a center of silent strategy. Visitors added another layer of complexity. Guests were observed carefully, what they said, how they acted, and what they avoided discussing. Servants adjusted meals, service, and even room arrangements to maintain appearances. Every detail mattered, because in a Victorian household, reputation and social standing were everything. At night, after meals were cleared and fires dimmed, the kitchen finally quieted. Yet even then, the staff reflected on the day, shared subtle observations, and prepared for the next morning. They knew the rhythms of the household, the hidden tensions, and the secrets that must remain contained. The family above stairs might sleep, unaware of how much the kitchen staff knew. Every whisper, every quarrel, every minor drama had been observed, interpreted, and managed. The kitchen knew, and through careful attention and quiet labor, it ensured that life above stairs remained calm, polished, and perfect. In the Victorian home, the kitchen wasn't just a place to cook, it was a silent witness, a hub of knowledge, and a guardian of the household's secrets. Its walls held countless untold stories, all carefully preserved by those who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. The household's outward perfection depended as much on the kitchen's vigilance as it did on the family's manners. In Victorian households, the servants followed strict rules. Silence, discretion, and obedience were expected. Yet, within this rigid system, small acts of resistance quietly unfolded. These acts were subtle, clever, and often unnoticed, but they allowed servants to assert a tiny bit of control in a world where they had very little. A minor delay in service, a missing button left unpolished, or a playful adjustment to a tray could all be forms of silent defiance. Nothing disruptive, nothing noticeable enough to earn punishment, but enough to remind the servant that they had agency. These small acts were never about rebellion. They were about survival, cleverness, and personal satisfaction. Humor often played a role. A maid might slightly exaggerate a story when recounting a child's mischief, or a cook might add a tiny extra pinch of sugar to a favored dessert. These small gestures brought joy, relief, and a sense of personality into a life defined by rules and invisibility. The family above stairs rarely noticed, but the servants knew timing was key. A footman might slightly slow his steps in the hallway, or a junior maid might linger for an extra moment in a room. These small deviations allowed them to assert subtle control without drawing attention. Even the slightest hesitation became a form of communication among staff, a silent acknowledgement of shared understanding and camaraderie. Some acts were practical. Servants might hide small comforts, like a warm scarf or a private treat, for themselves or a fellow worker. These moments weren't selfish. They were necessary for maintaining morale in a demanding and invisible world. Small pleasures became a quiet rebellion against exhaustion and strict hierarchy. Observation also offered opportunities. Servants sometimes anticipated mistakes by the family or guests and corrected them subtly, bending the rules slightly in the process. A misplaced cup might be adjusted quietly, or a stubborn child's tantrum diffused with a wink or whispered word. These acts preserved order while also giving servants a sense of quiet agency. Gestures of solidarity were common. Junior maids often shared small tricks or tips with each other to make work easier. A note left discreetly, a hidden spare key, or a whispered reminder became tools of invisible teamwork. These gestures were acts of resistance in that they subverted the household's rigid control in tiny, harmless ways. Even minor exaggerations were forms of power. Servants might emphasize a task's difficulty or exaggerate a child's mischief to gain sympathy, a laugh, or a short reprieve. These tiny stretches of truth allowed them to shape their own experience without jeopardizing their position. It was clever, safe, and satisfying. Acts of humor and imagination were also important. A servant might hum quietly while polishing, create small doodles, or recite lines of poetry to themselves. These moments weren't seen by the family, but gave the servant a sense of individuality and life beyond strict obedience. The invisible world behind the scenes became slightly more human, more bearable. Despite these small resistances, the household remained orderly. The family saw calm, polished floors, perfectly arranged meals, and quiet children. They never realized that their servants had their own tiny world of jokes, tricks, and subtle defiance happening beneath the surface. The balance between obedience and resistance was delicate, but it allowed servants to preserve their dignity and sanity. By night, after the long day of labor, careful observation, and subtle defiance, the servants retreated to their rooms or quietly rested in the corridors. Their small acts of resistance, though unnoticed, were victories in a world where power was rarely theirs. These quiet gestures maintained morale, preserved individuality, and added small sparks of life to the strict rhythm of service. In Victorian households, obedience and discretion were demanded, but even the most constrained servants found ways to push back softly. Through humor, clever timing, subtle gestures, and tiny acts of rebellion, they created a hidden world of agency, autonomy, and humanity. The household appeared flawless above stairs, but below, life moved with a quiet, clever rhythm of its own. Life below stairs in a Victorian household wasn't just work, chores, and silent observation. Amidst the polished floors and hushed corridors, love quietly bloomed, hidden from the family above stairs. yet alive and vibrant in its own way. Servants spent long hours together, often working side by side. Shared labor created bonds, footmen carrying heavy trays, maids cleaning, and cooks preparing meals. In these routines, friendships and subtle attractions grew. A glance across the kitchen, a shared joke during a long day, or helping each other in secret could spark connection. These small moments became the foundation of love in a world where it had to remain invisible. Romance was delicate. Courting openly was impossible. Rules, hierarchy, and constant oversight meant that relationships had to be subtle, clever, and hidden. Secret glances, brief touches, or whispered words became the language of love. Servants developed a keen sense of timing, knowing when to speak softly, when to leave a note, or when to linger unnoticed in a corridor. Letters played an important role. Hidden messages tucked into pockets, under plates, or in folded linens allowed communication without risk of discovery. A note might express admiration, longing, or a joke shared only between the two. These small acts carried huge emotional weight in a world where expression was carefully limited. Shared humor also kept love alive. A whispered pun during service, a playful tease, or a knowing glance could lighten the heavy days and reinforce bonds. These small, almost invisible interactions created intimacy that went unnoticed by the family above stairs but strengthened relationships below. Physical contact was always subtle. A touch on the arm while passing by, a brush of the hand when arranging silverware, or an accidental lean in a quiet corridor could speak volumes. Every gesture had to be measured. Too much could be noticed. Too little could be meaningless. The servant's skill was in balancing affection with discretion. Even small sacrifices were a part of love below stairs. A servant might take on extra work to allow their partner a moment of rest, cover for a mistake, or ensure privacy for a brief conversation. These acts weren't grand, they were quiet, practical, and meaningful, forming the unspoken language of loyalty and care. Jealousy and rivalry existed too, but they were subtle. Glances, small sighs, or whispered comments could indicate tension. Yet, in the strict hierarchy of the household, servants learned to navigate these emotions carefully. Love below stairs required patience, observation, and a careful balancing of feelings. Celebrations, too, were hidden. A stolen piece of cake, a shared laugh in an empty corridor, or a brief pause under the stars in the backyard offered moments of joy. These small pleasures allowed relationships to flourish without disrupting the household's order or reputation. Despite the secrecy, love below stairs was real, resilient, and deeply human. It provided comfort in long hours, companionship in isolation, and warmth amidst the structured demands of service. Servants could be exhausted, overworked, and invisible to the family, but in love they found agency, connection, and joy. By nightfall, after meals cleared and fires dimmed, couples retreated to quiet corners or small private rooms. They whispered, laughed softly, or simply shared the comfort of presence. Love existed in these tiny moments, hidden, delicate, but powerful. It was a secret life, alive and thriving, beneath the household's polished exterior. Even as the family above stairs slept, unaware of the small dramas and joys below, The servants carried their quiet romances with pride and care. These relationships added color, warmth, and humanity to lives often defined by labor and discretion. Love below stairs was a hidden heartbeat of the household, proving that even in strictest environments, the human spirit finds ways to connect, endure, and flourish. Victorian households were full of rules, rituals, and secrets, but they were also full of stories, whispers, and little fears. Servants, who spent hours moving quietly through hallways, kitchens, and hidden staircases, often developed a collection of ghost stories and superstitions. These weren't just for fun, they helped make sense of a strict, mysterious, and sometimes frightening world. Every creaking floorboard, flickering candle, or gust of wind seemed to carry a story. A door left slightly ajar might be blamed on a wandering spirit. A shadow in the corner might be a warning or a sign. Servants, moving silently at night, became experts at reading these signs. Some were scared, some amused, but all treated them with careful respect. Superstitions governed small daily acts. A broken mirror could signal bad luck. Spilling salt required tossing some over the shoulder, and encountering a black cat prompted caution. These little rituals weren't just beliefs, they were ways to exert control over a world that often felt unpredictable. By following them, servants felt safer and more confident as they navigated hidden corridors and quiet rooms. Ghost stories were especially popular at night. After long hours of work, servants gathered quietly in the kitchen or servants' hall. They shared tales of past inhabitants, unexplained sounds, or sightings in empty hallways. Some stories were funny, some eerie, but all reinforced a sense of camaraderie and caution. These tales also reminded everyone that the house had a memory, a life beyond what the family above stairs could see. Certain rooms were considered especially haunted. Attics, basements, and unused bedrooms often carried reputations for strange noises, cold drafts, or eerie shadows. Servants approached these spaces carefully, aware of both practical dangers like unstable floorboards and the stories that gave them life. A hesitant step or whispered warning became part of daily routines, blending superstition with practical caution. Even everyday objects carried meaning. Portraits of ancestors, clocks that ticked unusually, or old furniture had reputations. Servants sometimes placed objects in particular ways, avoided certain spots, or followed rituals to prevent bad luck. These small actions shaped their day-to-day work, adding a layer of ritual and care to otherwise ordinary chores. Superstitions also offered guidance. Before delivering news, crossing thresholds, or interacting with family members, servants sometimes paused to follow their rituals. These acts gave them confidence, a sense of order, and a feeling of control over unpredictable events. In a household where every movement mattered, these little rules mattered more than anyone above stairs realized. Stories of ghosts also reinforced hierarchy. Tales of previous staff, mysterious apparitions of former family members, or whispered warnings about past mistakes reminded servants of their place. They learned caution, discretion, and the importance of moving silently. Ghost stories were entertainment, but also subtle lessons in survival, obedience, and awareness. Even humor was present. Some tales became exaggerated, playful or ironic. Servants would tease one another, add small twists to stories, or invent new hauntings for amusement. These light-hearted moments offered relief after long hours of work and tension, and created bonds among the staff. By nightfall, the house might appear quiet and calm to the family, but below stairs, stories and superstitions lingered. They shaped the rhythm of life, influenced careful movements, and added a hidden layer of meaning to the corridors, rooms, and staircases. Every creak, shadow, or flicker was watched and interpreted, often with a mix of fear, amusement, and respect. The kitchen, servant hall, and quiet corners became spaces where tales were told and wisdom was passed down. Ghost stories and superstitions were part of the invisible network that connected staff, preserved the household secrets, and made life below stairs slightly more colourful, slightly more human, and a lot more interesting. Through these stories and rituals, servants navigated the hidden world of the Victorian house. Shadows and whispers became companions, lessons in caution, and sources of entertainment. The house, alive with history and mystery, held its secrets carefully, while the staff, guided by tales and traditions, ensured that life above stairs continued uninterrupted, calm, and flawless. In Victorian households, servants often spent years working in a single home, moving silently through corridors, kitchens, and nurseries. Yet, despite their constant presence and invisible labour, they were expected to leave without leaving a trace. Their work, care, and knowledge had to vanish seamlessly when they moved on, as though they had never been there. Leaving without a trace meant more than packing belongings. Servants had to erase evidence of their routines, habits, and personal touches. A scrubbed floor, carefully arranged utensils, and a tidy bedroom ensured that the household appeared unchanged. Any mark of presence, misplaced item, a scribble, or a personal effect was considered improper. The goal was invisibility, even in departure. The process began quietly. Personal effects were packed discreetly, notes and letters hidden or disposed of, and work areas meticulously cleaned. Small adjustments, like polishing silverware, rearranging linens, or resetting chairs, ensured that the household remained flawless. Servants understood that their legacy was invisible. Their skill lay in leaving no sign that they had ever been part of the daily life above stairs. Departures were often emotional, though rarely public. Bonds formed with fellow staff, children, or even members of the family above stairs. Yet these connections had to be carefully managed. A lingering glance, a whispered farewell, or a small gift could express emotion without disrupting decorum. Everything had to remain subtle, reflecting the servant's role as both part of and apart from the household. Timing was also important. Departures had to be coordinated with the household schedule, ensuring minimal disruption. Breakfasts, lessons, or social events continued as planned. The staff worked like clockwork, masking the absence of a valued member while maintaining the appearance of calm and order. Servants also carried knowledge that could not travel with them. Secrets of the family, hidden routines, and private matters were never shared. Even after leaving, they maintained discretion, understanding that trust, loyalty, and reputation were as important as their labour. This invisible contract was part of the code of service, binding staff to silence long after they had walked away. Some departures were joyful, moving to better positions, joining family, or seeking independence. Others were bittersweet, leaving behind friends, routines, and familiar corridors. Regardless, the act of leaving required careful planning, emotional restraint, and attention to detail. The household could never know the effort required to vanish gracefully. Even small tasks mattered. Forgotten cups, slightly out of place utensils, or an unswept corner could betray a servant's presence. Experienced staff corrected these before departure, leaving the home pristine, orderly, and unchanged. Their labor became invisible, a silent testament to years of skill, patience, and discretion. Leaving without a trace also meant emotional resilience. Servants often felt invisible in life and had to maintain composure in departure. Farewells were private, unspoken, or carefully coded in small gestures. They carried memories and relationships quietly, ensuring that the household above stairs remained undisturbed by their absence. The home itself seemed unaffected. Polished floors, neatly arranged furniture, and the calm rhythm of daily life continued as if nothing had changed. Yet, behind this perfection lay a network of effort, care, and invisible labor that vanished with the departing servant. Their presence had been essential, yet it had to be erased seamlessly. By nightfall, the household returned to its normal rhythm. Fires glowed softly, children slept, and the family moved through polished corridors. The absence of the departing servant left no mark, no disruption, only the continued calm, order, and perfection that had been maintained for years. The labor, care, and secrets of the servant had been complete, leaving behind only an invisible legacy. In Victorian homes, leaving without a trace was both an art and a responsibility. It required skill, discretion, emotional control, and meticulous care. Servants worked tirelessly to maintain the illusion of perfection, both in life and in departure, ensuring that the household above stairs remained flawless, calm, and untouched by the countless small efforts that had sustained it. Victorian history is often told through the lives of the rich and powerful, the family above stairs, their wealth, their decisions. But there's another story, quieter and less noticed, the story of the servants, the invisible people who kept the household alive and observed everything. These were the voices history never heard. Servants knew the truth behind every polished floor, every neatly arranged room, and every well-rehearsed social event. They saw the arguments hushed behind closed doors, the secret joys and sorrows of children, and the quiet struggles of women upstairs. They witnessed illness, grief, and even love, hidden, discreet, and sometimes dramatic. These voices were never recorded in history books, yet they shaped the household just as much as the family above stairs. Their labor, discretion, and understanding created the calm, orderly appearance that outsiders admired. Every perfectly timed meal, every cleaned corridor, every quiet adjustment was a servant's act of care and knowledge. Servants moved invisibly, yet they were deeply involved in the life of the house. They knew the daily routines, the small habits of each family member, and the unspoken rules that governed behavior. They noticed details that mattered, when a child was anxious, when a lady was secretly sad, or when a guest might be overstepping boundaries. Their eyes and ears preserved the household's delicate balance. Their stories were full of emotion, humor, and subtle drama. They laughed quietly at minor mishaps, soothed small fears, and celebrated tiny victories in ways that went unseen. Their resilience and cleverness allowed them to survive strict hierarchies and maintain discretion, all while carrying the weight of unseen labor. Some servants found small ways to assert themselves, subtle jokes, secret friendships, quiet romances, or tiny gestures of resistance. These acts were invisible to the family above stairs, but meaningful to those living and working below. They were the hidden heartbeat of the household, often stronger and more persistent than the visible order above. The voices of servants also carried wisdom. They learned patience, observation, and human behavior in ways that no formal education could provide. They knew how to handle emergencies, care for the sick, and maintain calm amidst chaos. They understood the nuances of power, authority, and discretion in ways that shaped the household's life every single day. Despite their importance, servants were rarely recognized. History seldom records their names, their stories, or the quiet heroism in their work. Yet their perspective offers a richer, fuller understanding of Victorian life. Without them, the elegant facades, social events, and structured households above stairs would have collapsed into disorder. Their voices remind us that history is not only made by the wealthy, the powerful, or the famous, it is also made by those who observe, labor, and care silently. The lives of servants were constrained, but they were also full of humanity, creativity, and intelligence. They preserved secrets, maintained order, and witnessed life in its raw, unpolished form. By the end of each day, after tasks were completed and hallways fell silent, the servants' work continued in small, invisible ways, careful adjustments, quiet observations, and subtle acts of care. Their labor and insight were never credited, yet they were essential. These invisible voices, always present but unheard, were the true guardians of the household. Victorian history, full of grandeur and decorum, often ignores the lives below stairs. But those servants moving silently through kitchens, corridors, and nurseries carried the heartbeat of the home. Their stories, emotions, struggles, and triumphs were never recorded in the history books, but they mattered just as much, and in many ways, they kept history alive in ways we rarely notice. The house may look perfect from the outside, but its soul, its rhythm, and its hidden stories belong to the invisible witnesses, the servants, whose voices history never heard, but whose presence shaped everything we now remember.